And hello, welcome everyone to the Theosophical Society DC Lodge. And we are in our public meeting today with Veronica Boutte, is our presenter to Roundtable. So thank you for being here, and we will begin with a moment with the, of course, if I can find it here to, see, I've lost my bar to bring up the
invocation.
Yeah, the invocation. Hang on, and I will bring it up here for us to look at. So we can, if everyone will mute themselves, I will put this on the screen. Go back to share screen. And find it there. Share. And I got back to where I was. There we go. Can everyone see that? That just disappeared. Is it on your screen? It only disappeared on my screen. Aren't I used to it?
Yeah, it was there for a second. And
there for a second, and then it wasn't. Okay, one moment. Apologies. That's interesting. There we go. Okay, now if I can get out of here to see, every time I put it up, my whole screen disappears. So I'm going to do my best. You may not see it completely full on your screen, but you'll see it well enough to read it. So, all right. Everybody can see that? All right, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and ask everyone to mute themselves, and I'll go ahead and read this out loud, and you can read it. I muted myself like I was telling everyone else to. All right. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May all who feel themselves as one with thee know they are therefore one with every other. Thank you. And we will go ahead, and I will turn this over to Veronica to go ahead and take over. Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you, Desiree. I hope you're all doing fine. I hope you had a good week. And I wanted to ask you, but you don't actually have to give an answer. I just hope that a few of you had time to watch the video, at least in part. It's okay if you did not. And I hope that you enjoyed it, or at least got something out of it. It's a difficult choice to find sources on the Upanishads that are, I would say, which description is relevant to the 21st century. In other words, not too arduous to listen to or understand or appreciate. And Debashish Banerji is one of my favorites, together with another famous scholar on the Upanishads. I don't know if you can say this, Eknath Eshwaran. He has the same book published in the same format. He has the Dhammapada, the Upanishads, and the Bhagavad Gita. And I highly recommend, because each, in the case of the Upanishads, each one has a very clear, short description of its meaning, if it is something that is of interest to you. Okay, so as, of course, I'm not gonna speak all the time, but it's kind of interesting because as we were reading the invocation, I just realized that it sounds like a Upanishad. at least one verse of an entire Upanishad. So, knowing we all know Annie Besant, I don't know if it's a coincidence, if she was actually inspired. She must have been, because she must have read, had access to these Hindu scriptures all day long. Anyway, it's interesting. So that gives us an entry to what an Upanishad would be. So on that talk by Debashish, there are a few, at least 4 or 5 very salient points that explain very simply and clearly what the Upanishads were about, at least from the point of view of a dedicated Hindu, I would say himself, Debashish. Debashish is also, I think, probably one of the 2 or 3 most famous scholars on Sri Aurobindo. So if you are interested in Aurobindo, go back to Debashish. He has zillions of conversations about Aurobindo. And so I thought we could, when we start talking to each other, depending on what you actually remember, gathered, or your impressions are about the video, we can go back to these major salient points. So let me start by asking who has a pressing question, who is confused, what you actually got from watching the video. If you have nothing to say about it, that's something to say. So don't be shy. It was not homework. It was just a resource, a tool to use for a conversation on, what is a major part of Mother India's legacy. So you can unmute yourself if you want, you can raise your hands, you can just jump in. I mean, how many? 23? I think you can just jump in. Okay, I don't see anyone speaking, so I wonder what it means. Don't be shy, tell me why you cannot say anything.
No.
Hi, Almar.
Hi, yeah, no, I think it was a very inspirational presentation from the speaker, and in very dense, and I think rich. I think it was a very rich thing, and what I got out of it is quite a few things, I think. Even though I have never really read the Upanishad, don't know much about it, but it seems to be from this presentation something very much needs to be investigated more, because it seems to be what I've got out from the speakers was like it points towards the source of all sorts of different thoughts and philosophies in terms of Zen, from like, I think they said somehow Zen was a derivative of it in terms of the dealing with the paradox. Mm-hmm. And I think the paradox really was mentioned a lot in being some sort of contemporary tool to deal with the difficulties we are reaching now, because it seems to be like a dead end in certain ways of thinking and stuff. So the thing of paradox can be used as a tool to deal with the current problems we have, or probably we have to deal with somehow with the paradox to some degree. And yeah, and also kind of like how it says, like the Upanishad was dealing with, there was the division between the unity and duality, in terms like there's Maya seems to be the thing there, the division, and somehow that's how I saw it. What he's saying is that any teachings, religious teachings, or any things, always dealing with, to some degree, with this kind of like penetrating this veil to recognize unity to some degree. Seems to be in anything. So I think that's what I got out of it, what that I said. And that's what I sort of like saw from on the other thing. What I found very interesting too, but there's some Upanishad about the Om. And I found that quite, I think, too, because everybody sort of knows, like, oh yeah, the Om, but here and yeah, the whole Om chanting, but I think lots of people know about it, but never really like, oh, you just do it and somehow you will get something out of it. But I think there's some sort of like focus on, I think you mentioned a book or something where you focus somehow the different stages of consciousness on it, and you get a different results. That's a thing I want to investigate it more. And there's other things I found which sort of left out, but kind of like inspired me a lot, and actually how I can connect it with my own, what I've
can you say that again, the last few words?
Something what I found was sort of left out a bit, yeah. And I don't know where I got this statement somewhere too. I think from what is it? Who is it now? I got this statement somewhere that talking about theosophy in general, that they're kind of like a little bit anti-Christian or something. Someone made this comment. I forgot now who said that, but Steiner. I read something about Steiner, and he said somewhere in a speech that they're a bit anti-Christian or something. Nothing to do with it. I'm just saying like that. That was not really mentioned much, but I came across a book, like a philosopher, Kierkegaard, and he kind of really dealt in this particular book. I think it was about the killing of Isaac or something, dealing with the paradox in a really interesting way, from different perspectives of the players in the story and stuff. And I think that's what triggered me a little bit, having some sort of like how dealing with the paradox from the like the Christian way, not necessarily from Zen or from other like knowledge things where we know there is something about the paradox, but the Christian things actually has the paradox there as well, in different things. But that's the thing. So I probably could go on, but I won't now.
Okay.
So I got a lot out of it anyway.
Well, it certainly sounds like it. I mean, thank you for these deep comments. I think you did a fabulous job. You must have taken notes and all of that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned some of the points, that like 2 or 3 of the salient points that I was referring to, and one of them is the paradox. And this concept of using paradoxes brings 2 lines of thoughts, and certainly one that applies to the how can I say, the discoveries, I would say, of the past few hundred years, refers to science. And here is an example from the Isha Upanishad, which is a very short one. The translation, the title translation is, according to Eshvaran, is the inner ruler, namely we, I mean, as we understand ourselves. In the introduction to this very short 2 pages Upanishad, listen to this, is all this is full, all that is full. From fullness, fullness comes. When fullness is taken from fullness, fullness still remains. Om, Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Talk about a paradox. Let me read it again. All this is full, all that is full. From fullness, fullness comes. Okay. When fullness is taken from fullness, fullness still remains. Now, in the age of logocentrism, there would be, a webinar on Zoom that would last for hours as to how to logically reconcile this little sentence. And of course, the Upanishads it's filled with them. But I think this is the easiest one, and it's also one that is very, very well known by non-Hindu societies.
If you substitute the word infinity for fullness,
right,
it kind of makes more sense.
Yes. Yes. And thank you, Ed, because that would take us into a conversation about the language used in the, actually in all of the Hindu scriptures, and the issue with language, but the issue with translations. Even though in that case, the Isha Upanishad, it's usually, I mean, these few words are usually translated fairly the same way. But you're right. And actually, this would be a personal practice. One could read the Upanishad and actually in one's thought, mind, make those substitution and get probably more out of them. I must confess, I do it. I was reading a few before our conversation, and I always substitute the Lord or He with nothing, actually, no word for either. And that reconciles me with my own stupidity and ignorance, saying, well, you cannot go beyond that, so you still have your limitations, but at least you're reading the Upanishad and get some, something out of it. If I were to respect the translation, I would stop reading them because, in view of my limitations, it brings irritation. Anyway, that's beside the point. However, there is also, Debashish introduces the Upanishads, I thought, in a very interesting, personal, but important way. He makes a point of saying that they are a body of literature of India, and really poetry. That's easy to understand. You can read for a few seconds just what we're at. It's very poetic, even though some of them are storytelling, but it's still very poetic. But the main point, it's literature. What does that mean? Can anyone talk about the distinction between literature and what else? Why is it important to consider these as literature, poetry, as opposed to what?
As opposed
it's
to
much easier than you think. Don't think too much.
Maybe as opposed to dogmatic or historical or.
And what do you mean by dogmatic? What would be dogmatic? Or sometimes could be dogmatic.
That I think I'm not I confess I did not watch the film, and I'm not that familiar with the Upanishads other than flipping through my little book. But I think it has a sense, a bit of a purity, that it's not in the box of, you know, you have to think this way or you have to think that way, although it has some solid instructions on how to think. If you see this, then you will know. But it's, I think it's more like a seed than it is like, you know, here's a seed and here's what you do. You know, you can plant it or you cannot. Versus here's a tree and we're going to make you eat the whole tree because we think you should eat this tree. You know, it's free of the this is the only right way because we said so. There's a different energy to it, I think, than dogma would have.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry. Yes, go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, literature as opposed to instruction manual or history.
Yes. Thank you,
Veronica, I have one last comment. Adrian's here, and I enjoyed it tremendously. I'll watch it again. It was very thrilling. I liked what he said about the first part. It may not be the answer to the question, but how the teachings came down into the culture, and the culture and the stratification of the society was built upon the teachings. And I think literature is a tool to help the masses understand these great teachings.
Thank you. Okay, you are how do you say it? Nailing putting the nail with the hammer, whatever. I don't remember my own metaphor.
Hitting the nail on the head.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. It is literature, namely, it is not religious scriptures.
I saw Stephen.
That's what Debashish said, and this is what I was trying to have you articulate, in this case particularly. So what does that mean? Well, two things, like you very well articulated: the purity, the seed that you plant, no dogma, no doctrine, no set of instructions. You just do whatever you want with it, which is really real, freedom. What is freedom? But I mean, it's encouraging because it's like no strings attached, okay? Additionally, like Adrian very well said, it's very important to remember that if you look at the Vedas that precede, you look at the whole body of literature of India, and it's huge. So if you were just to look at the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the Gita, and nothing else, not even the philosophy of India or whatever, there has never been in the thousands of years until this very day, any authority or agency in India that says what is what. And well, not in terms of justice and law, but in terms of what is written. And there's a simple explanation, is that it's, again, one of these oral transmitted civilizations. So yes, it's encouraging for people like you and me to get into it because you decide what it is in your view and what it does to you, which makes an enormous difference if you compare it with at least part of what happened in the Western world or even in other parts of the world where, you know, the word is the word and that's it. Anyway, and the consequences that if you misunderstand the words, the language, it has consequences, maybe to your soul, maybe to your brain waves, maybe one thing or the other, okay? For instance, I'll give you another example in the Kina Upanishads, translated as who moves the world. The student inquires, who makes, and my translation is what? Okay. What makes my mind think? What fills my body with vitality? What causes my tongue to speak? What is that invisible that sees through my eyes and hears through my ears. What is the answer from the supposed teacher? Now Phil is laughing. I don't know if it's laughing at the text or not. So the teacher replies, the self is the ear of the ear, the eye of the eye, the mind of the mind, the word of words, and the life of life. Rising above the senses and the mind and renouncing separate existence, the wise realizes the deathless self. That brings us to another point, important part in the video that actually Enmar mentioned. So who wants to take a guess? It's not a paradox anymore. It's a concept, and it's actually becomes more than conceptual because it leads to something that's very crucial and actually was really now permeates the Western sometimes attitude or practices. And what would that be?
Veronica, can you hear me
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
Before you move to that, I saw a few people unmute. So I wanted to let you know that it was Stephen.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It was Stephen, Sue, and Gregory, all unmuted while you were
Okay.
talking.
So let's do it that way. Stephen, Sue, and Gregory. Go ahead.
Well, the comment I had goes just before this current topic, and literature is living. And what I saw in what I enjoyed about the video is it's living, and we can add to it. And the point made in the video that we have new tools, like it doesn't have to be a book that's written anymore. It can be visual, it can be poetry, it can be performance. And it brought to mind, A, it's living, B, we can contribute to it as theosophists. And so that's got my mind thinking about how we can do that.
Yes, practicality. Thank you, Stephen. Sue is next. Yes.
So I didn't realize there was a video to watch before this presentation. I will definitely watch it. I love the Upanishads, and and I didn't have much to say at the beginning of our discussion here, but you talked about the self. Eshwaran might use the word self, or capital S self, or Brahman. In my translation, Prabhavananda, and I can't remember, there's a co-author with him. Very good, small book, very easy to read. So what I think is a wonderful, yes, perfect, Manchester and Swami Prabhavananda. Yeah, very good, thank you. So firstly, the most important Upanishad Mundaka is in that the idea of the two birds. So there's us. So one bird is us living in the world, eating and interacting. And then the second bird is the witness. And so the two birds, known by the same name, sit on the same branch of the same tree. One bird eats the sweet and sour fruits of life, and that's how I interact in the world. And the other bird looks on without eating. So the second bird is the watcher, or the witness. And I just think it's just so beautiful. But I just wanted to comment on that really quickly. But one of the most important teachings is about the self, or Brahman. And so it says, it's not for the sake of the wife that the husband finds the wife dear. It's because of, or for the sake of Brahman, or it's for the sake of the self, capital S. And then there's maybe 20 examples of this. And that's what I just wanted to say in response to what you were speaking about, the self. I recommend the Upanishads. They're so rich in their stories, very easy to read, really. And if you get confused, just don't read that one anymore. Pick another one, because there's some really good stories in there for learning. Oh, I'm covering up my camera. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Sue. Yeah, we're going to get back to that theme of Brahman and Atman. Yeah, that's why people know my perennial insistence on every year when they say, what are we going to read this summer? I always say the Upanishads, and I stop saying it now because there's so much to read. But yeah, thank you, Sue, for your suggestion, because it's easy to read, and it wouldn't even take a whole summer to read short ones. Anyway, and then we have Gregory, right?
So sometime we should
Gregory.
read it.
Okay, go ahead, Gregory.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
From far away. It's better.
On my phone, and that's a little bit of a
Yeah,
challenge.
it's fine now. It's
Okay, great. I had to put my speaker next to you. So I have two questions. One was about your mentioning this, the Upanishads as literature, and I'm wondering, are you saying in literature in the same way that we would have a book of literature that we would read, anything, any book written by an American author or something like that? Or I sometimes look at those as not quite mythology, but my understanding in the Hindu sense is they are kind of transmitting the Dharma. They're sort of providing, say, without hard rules, a framework and a guidance and a model of wisdom and a deeper look into reality. Is that not true? Or that when you say literature, would you compare that to any type of literature we would read, Gone with the Wind, perhaps?
No, probably not. And I think it has to do with cultural differences. In the West, we tend to categorize everything. So, for the Upanishads, we would say, well, it falls in the category of poetry or scriptures or philosophy, or to this day, even self-help or what have you, because we do use these categories all the time. In India, it's totally different. And India is so permeated by the spiritual aspects, or at least the higher consciousness aspects of life, at all levels, including the planet, that they really inherently see that this is sacred texts. But then you come to the West, and like I said, every one of us is going to find a category for them and get something different from them. So it's difficult, but scholarly speaking, if you will, or historically speaking, in India, it's just literature. They might come up with sacred literature, but it is so obvious to them. It's in their DNA. So they are going to respect it. And we would not. So that, it might be an excuse on my part, but I see it as cultural differences. And we do it with, other scriptures as well. Anyone else wanted to say something?
I wanted to say something, Veronica.
Yes.
When I studied the Upanishads long time ago, they were chanted.
Yes.
And basically the chanting helped me particularly get out of my head. They were chanted, and then the English part of it was explained in a poetic form.
Yes.
So when you're talking about literature, much like the Celts did, things were transmitted by sound.
Right.
And the quality of the sound has everything to do with the understanding, the wisdom, let me put it that way, not the intellectual understanding.
Right. And it's the same for the Quran.
Right.
Somebody who is not Arabic speaking, and ancient Arabic absolutely cannot understand the Quran, even under the best.
Well, and it's also very similar to going to a Jewish temple and hearing the Torah.
Right, right.
So
Thank you. Yeah.
yeah,
It's not only oral, but it's more than oral. It's actually chanting. Yeah. Thank you. So that's a very important point. Adrienne raised her hand.
In the very, very beginning, and I was a little bit distracted, but he was speaking about the caste system that developed as a result of these teachings. And the caste system, as I know, and perhaps you can speak a little bit to that, was very widespread in India, correct? And the divisions were quite clear. So when you say that the literature of the Upanishads and then the Vedas, it was free for people to look at in any way they possibly could, but then you have a very strict caste system. How do you reconcile those two?
Yes, good question, Adrienne. Well, I lived in India back in the early 80s, so that was prior to major political changes, and I observed the caste system in very practical ways. So based on my experience and being involved with many Indian people community here in Washington, here's what happens. If we go back in time, the caste system was actually a very, very, not only, I would say almost fair and also productive system. Because in view of the large population of India, if nothing else, it allowed for some sort of equality, if you want, or at least justice between all these people who couldn't possibly, over the millennia, get access to anything from education to food to jobs to shelter to whatever. So again, because of what Gwyn said, it was orally transmitted. Anyone would have access to those chants and practice and so on. And we will, in a moment, we'll talk about more practices. And so at different levels. So of course, if you were a Brahmin, you got, all you could get from an Upanishad. If you were in the lower ranks, you might get something, but you would still interpret it from your own standpoint, much like we would do today, actually. But going back to the caste system, if you add to the caste system the appearance of colonization, then you get into a disaster. And that's a very sensitive topic to me personally, colonization. We need to decolonize ourselves individually, which we can certainly do as theosophists, or should be doing. And so, yes, it led to atrocities. And then there were reforms later on in India with Gandhi and all of that, and of course the independence. And now we can observe, other circumstances, good and bad. Probably, I think it's official that the wealthiest women in the world are Indian women, and things of that nature. So this, to me, based on my experience, is the, and when I was there in the 80s, I would see how this, and there had been reforms already, but I would still see that the caste system doesn't work anymore as it would have worked millennia before. Brigitte has something to say.
Yes, I thought I heard the speaker say that the caste system arose out of the Vedic notion that there was a central sun, and then things moving down from there. But that it became a problem early on. And then there was a contentiousness between the ruling class and the priestly class, because the priestly class then vied for power by coming up with all kinds of rituals. And to some extent, I thought the Upanishads was a way where people transcended that, said we want to get out of this caste on the one side and priests on the other side. We want to make it possible for ordinary people who feel the need to reach for the divine. I thought that's what I heard.
And you heard well. And that brings us actually to another topic that is worth mentioning. Well, yeah, the caste system at times worked well, but it wasn't, a bed of roses. That's for sure. Now you said something very interesting, and it is that, yes, the Upanishads were, some sort of balm that you put on a wound. Like today, if you go to South America, for instance, religion is a crutch. Religion is a help for people who are in total despair. Okay, we understand that. We see it today. Another aspect, so yes, the Upanishads filled that purpose whenever it was needed, which is not entirely negative due to the quality of what they're about. It saved people from despair, or at least they died more peacefully. When you look at the Gita, and we studied the Gita extensively, it seems to me that we keep forgetting that the Gita was written specifically for the warrior castes. Why? Because they needed encouragement to go to war. So we make it this very, very spiritual, highly mystical thing about the ego fighting itself and getting rid of the ego. And well, it was really much more down to earth than that. I'm not saying we are wrong in doing that, not at all. But originally, the Gita was for the warriors, to find a way for them to go to the battlefield with some sense of, respite, some sense, not only motivation, but maybe less guilt, whatever it is.
Veronica,
Okay.
will you say something about Jeffrey Mishlove and Banerji's conversation about the Atman going into the individual self and to the inner self? And what I got from that, because it's the first time I really heard the Atman used in that way. And it was, it led me as a Jungian to think that it also encompasses the whole collective.
Yes.
Inner self of everyone. That's the point of oneness on the inner level.
Yes, and that's the other points we needed to what Banerji says about Atman and Brahman, and it's the neti, which means we should not identify with either one or the other, which again in the Western tradition would be, like I think he said, well, Banerji says it, the apophatic tradition and the cataphatic tradition, where we tend to, again, we are dualistic, remember? We are Cartesians. So we see one or the other, and we cannot live with both at the same time, but yes, we can. It's just that we're not used to it and we don't want to change. Okay, so that's 21st century. We are working on that, okay? Mutation. All right, so that was the other point. So let's recapitulate a little bit. We have the literature concept, Atman and Brahman, neti, no identification. And the paradoxes we went over. And here is just one more that we should get into that will bring us to maybe some, not conclusion, but more discussion. And it is that of this famous Maya concept. So I really liked what Debashish says about Maya, and there are other specialists in those fields who talk about Maya in a much more, I think, I have no authority to say, you know, whether it's better or not. It's not about being better, but it's about being more useful to understand Maya. It's not illusion, it's not ignorance. It's just not seeing the right thing. Doesn't mean that we're ignorant, it means that we are limited. We only have 5 senses, well, maybe 6 if you add the mind or the mental, okay, but that's not enough to see to see what's real. Okay, so I like it because it is in his own words. It says Maya is the dividing line between reality and the nervous system. And I like that because it makes it very tangible. We have a nervous system, that's all we have. Well, that's not really all, but that's all we use. So how can we expect with a nervous system which is absolutely awesome? I mean, it's unbelievably, it's the best. It's best than, at this point, at least AI, or the best of AI. Fine, but it's still not gonna do the job. Okay, so my question to you is, and that's yet, I think about the last thing we have time to talk about. What do we need to do since we only have that fantastic nervous system and we need something else? What is it that we do? What is the practice that is offered to us by Mother India in this case? It's easy.
Yoga.
It's all over the internet.
No yoga?
Yes, yoga. But again, I mean, it's not about stretching. Stretching is fantastic. Please do your stretching, but that's not the whole of yoga. The whole of yoga would be to use the nervous system and more. Good luck. Okay, but that's a gift again from Mother India. I mean, China also had, you know, its practices and so on. And then in the end, there's a remark that's also very interesting, and it is about Buddhism, that Buddhism, according to Debashish, but I tend to agree with him, Buddhism is, he says it's an extension of Hinduism. When I was teaching, and according to certain views, I would say that Buddhism is a reform of Hinduism. I would not compare it with the Protestant reform, you know, in view of the Catholic Church. That's a little different. But I think that the Buddha wanted to precisely, including the caste system that Adrian talks about, the Buddha wanted to clarify things a little bit. In fact, like Muhammad wanted to help with the exigencies, the demands of the Quran. So that's a good reminder. And in the end, what is it that we have in the West? Because we cannot be Hindus. It's simply impossible. We can go as close as we want, but we will not be really, we cannot encompass all that knowledge. What is it in the West that we really have that is absolutely wonderful as well, and that we can make use of, and that some of you are in practical terms making use of It's not, in addition to theosophy, don't miss theosophy because that's part of it, but.
Are you including meditation as a tool and distinguishing it from yoga, or are
But
you thinking something else?
Is with it. I'm looking at a broader, much broader body of knowledge and practices that we have as resources.
Does everybody know about this resource?
It's mentioned in the video, by the way.
Ah, okay.
Well, while people are looking, I want to point out there's a couple comments in the chat if you want to look at them, Veronica.
Go ahead, think a little bit about, and then let's see.
Brigitte mentions a book there.
It's something that Ed and Gwen and Candice and I are studying. To me, that has just opened up the world of the Upanishads like nothing before. So maybe most of you already know about it, but I thought I'd need to mention it because it's a Western person with a brilliant mind, intensely focused on theosophy, who has made these commentaries on this particular Upanishad, which just make it so clear and so understandable, right. And so enriching. So I just wanted to recommend it.
Thank you, Brigitte. And Phil also mentions that some branches of Buddhism have stayed much closer to Hinduism, and that's definitely the case. So again, there are so many branches and practices in Buddhism itself. And I would say that, for instance, if you look at as Buddhism moved away from India after only 200-300 years, and it moved northeast, I would say, by the time it reached China and Japan, it had become Chan or Zen, which is probably the furthest away, if you want to look at it this way, from Hindu scripture. Well, yes and no, but I mean, at least it feels like it's different from Hinduism. And again, that's based on, you know, cultural, and you mix it with Chinese philosophy and the like, and it becomes, you know, varieties of, you know, read William James, the varieties of religious literature. So yes, what tools do we have? I don't think I would not ignore them. I would not. I would think highly about them, and I'm glad Debashish mentioned this. We have philosophy and psychology, and I would add, that's only me, I would add modern science. I mean, at the present time, I get more from the philosophy of science than I ever did, because of discoveries and because of the challenges that we have. If we only look at the past couple of years, philosophy of science, by that I mean scientists who are considering, you know, the aspect of consciousness that a theosophist would consider. So I get a lot from them. I think we can ask if you have any other questions. Otherwise, it might be a good thing to.
Veronica, I found what I found very interesting in terms of what he said about Buddhism was some sort of like extension or maybe counter movement or something, and how he said like that it went right into the duality like more than the others, and then put it back out again. I think it's kind of like joining with the duality, with the problems of the world and stuff at the time, maybe, yeah. And then try to go back out. I thought that was an interesting comment.
Well, you know, I think if you look at the history of humankind, getting away, it's not even getting away, it's understanding duality is probably one of the most greatest challenge. In fact, Arnold Toynbee, the great historian, Arnold Toynbee has a quote to the effect that, you know, we fear the big threats like nuclear weapons nowadays, or wars, or natural disasters. We fear those because of our nervous system, when in fact what we should fear is ourselves. It's so profound. It's so profound, especially when we are building the forms of intelligence that could destroy us. So we need to meditate on that. So I'm just going to read one of the, I think, again, the Isha Upanishad, beautiful verses to conclude, but and then if anyone has any comment, we can just wrap it up this way. And I really commend you for watching a video, number one, taking the time to be here and really sharing this conversation with very, very nice participation. So here it goes. The Lord is enshrined in the hearts of all. The Lord is the supreme reality. Rejoice in him through renunciation. Covet nothing. All belongs to the Lord. Thus working, may you live 100 years. Thus alone will you work in real freedom. And you can substitute any part of the vocabulary that you wish. Doesn't have to be the Lord, whatever stands for the Lord in your mental mind. So, do we have any last comments to make, or?
I want to thank you, Veronica. Very interesting. And everyone, we have a minute left, but we can keep talking. It doesn't matter to me. Just wanted to let you all know. And before questions or comments, I wanted to add that I put it in the comments here that next week, Bill Katzenheim will be speaking on foreign aid, development, and the global effort to end extreme poverty by 2030. So that's what's next week's program. And again, I'll open that up for Veronica to finish in any comments.
Okay, well, I hope that you all enjoy the rest of your weekend, and that even if you don't read the Upanishads, we remember that they're a great source of understanding the mystery of consciousness in today's world. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you,
Desiree.
Thank you, Veronica. It was really nice for you. People are commenting. Thank you from Rosie for drawing the attention to this book. And Stephen says, outstanding, Veronica. And I think, so thank you. And I think everyone appreciated you bringing this to our attention. I have this little book. I never look at it. I open it every now and then. I'm like, oh, that's nice. It's sort of like fortune cookies, you know? So
thank you all.
So thank you, Veronica. And thank you, Shirini. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to see you all.
Bye-bye.
Okay, everyone, have a wonderful week. And Suzanne will be back next week. And thank you for being here.
Bye.
Sure.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Bill.